Okay, this is part 2. Okay. Sorry about the extra wait. For about a week, I was busy repainting my room. Here we go with part 2. Let's get it. In September of 1939, the Second World War will begin. A lot of changes will happen during the war. Most notably how all of the engines on the island were painted into wartime black, and those engines on the Northwestern Railway will receive the just simple NW lettering on their sides. Throughout 1940, bombing raids were carried out by Nazi Germany. These stations at Crosby, Upper Brendam, Kirkronan, and Tidnes were all severely damaged. Tidnes was one of the most damaged along with a bunch of damaged stations, and those had to go an extensive rebuild. The rebuilding of Tidnes Station would see it turn from how it looks in the model series into what it looks like in the later CGI series. This is the current condition of Tidnes Station in the Porterverse today. And in 1946, the engines that survived the war will all be repainted back into their NWR colors. The return to Northwestern colors will not last long, however, as just a few years later, in 1948, nationalization would take effect. The Northwestern Railway will become part of the Northwestern region of British Railways. Over the course of the 1950s, various changes, such as withdrawals and reassignments, would occur. Most notably how Toby was relocated from running the Arsdale tramway. Instead, he was now one of the runners of the Farquhar branch line alongside Thomas Percy. There were also two other trams that ran the branch alongside Toby, but they were located elsewhere as well, as British Railways would bring in the L1 known as Sigrid to run the branch line on their own. 1953 saw Henry be rebuilt into a 5MT. This is technically Henry Mark III, if you will, in the Porterverse, and this is Henry's current edition today. Also in 1953, the Queen of England herself, Queen Elizabeth II, would visit, and Gordon would pull the royal train. The next year, 1954, saw Sir Thomas Hatton I retire, and his son, Sir Charles Thomas Hatton II, replacing him and inheriting the baronetcy. In 1955, Duck would arrive after Percy was relocated to Thomas's branch line to help build the Plymouth Harbor. Duck was now the NAFR pilot. After a few years long construction effort, Plymouth Harbor would reopen in 1957, and it now exports like goods. 1958 saw Diesel arrive, and thus the whole Duck and the Diesel engine events from the book would occur. In the end, Diesel would be sent away from the island. It was later found out that Diesel was eventually scrapped by 1963, and according to many accounts of Diesel on the mainland, he will not be missed. 1964 saw Boko arrive on Sodor, and shortly after, Bill and Bed were driven nuts upon his first days, and Edward had to ultimately save him. Kind of funny. The next year, Edward ended up damaging himself in a storm while pulling a train. He was able to get the train home one time, but the damage would ultimately see himself out of service for the next 3 months, and thus Boko would become the primary runner until he returned. Shortly after Edward's return, the events of Wrong Road would occur. Between 1965 and 66, not much really happened, so we'll just fast forward to 1967. In this year, it was announced that the branch line on the west coast of Sodor, that originally went up to Cannes, would extend all the way up to Harwich. These plans were wanting to be carried out, but British Railways was holding back and trying to get it from not opening. This will ultimately begin to create tension amongst the Northwestern region and British Railways in general. Later on in the year, Douglas would help Oliver escape to Sodor. This whole incident will lead to Oliver revealing that British Railways was secretly planning to ban steam traction altogether on all of their rails. This would create a bit of a panic amongst the engines on the island and steam engines across the country. The tensions will eventually come to a head here, and the Northwestern Railway will ultimately sue the heads of British Railways to get this whole deal sorted out. The legal battle that ensued was absolutely massive and very dramatic, but the aftermath was ultimately this. The Northwestern region will ultimately win the case and gain their independence, and that some engines from British Railways will be handed over and part of the deal, and that any British Railways engines that were already on the island post-1948 will remain there under Northwestern ownership, among other very technical details. But now, the Northwestern region of British Railways was once again reborn into the Northwestern Railway. And with a major victory in his career, Sir Tom Hatton II will retire with honor, and pass it on to his son, Sir Stephen Tom Hatton III. And with this change in leadership, a new era will begin for the island. And of course, this new era will be covered more in detail in part 3. That should be out next week if all things go according to plan. But you never know if anything comes up, but expect it next week, should nothing go wrong. Thank you all very much for watching, and I shall see you all in the next one.